Oh, it's you. I'll be honest, I wasn't really expecting it until November. I'll be honest, we're kind of moving at the moment, so I'd offer you a seat, but Jesus Christ, you're still here? You want arena content now in the middle of patch 8.3? Jesus Christ. Alright, fine. But we're in the middle of moving, so no bits. We've got no time for bits. This one's going to be dry even for me. Positioning is an odd subject because it's both incredibly complex, but also seems to sort itself out. Like if you go into a game and just play, without ever thinking about where you're standing, there is no warning light, no points deducted from the score sheet. Positioning is something that will become subconscious with experience, but that also means that you can carry bad habits with you without recognizing it. As such, I do think this has value for experienced players. It's an opportunity to re-examine where you stand. Repositioning the stool. This video does have a theme. So, due to the complexity of the subject, this video is going to be a little scattershot. So we've got a table of contents down in the description, but watch the whole thing, I need the engagement. As with my last video on the subject, a quick disclaimer. We're going to be reviewing a lot of examples of poor positioning. Poor positioning does not necessarily reflect a player's ability. A series of rational decisions can still result in being in a bad position. This is a competitive game where the enemy team actually does have some say over where you choose to stand. So it's quite possible for good players who know what's going on to still find themselves in over their head with something, bad happening to them. So when we look at this footage, I want you to try to separate the outcomes from the players themselves. I say this to try to get you to resist the urge to be too judgmental of the individuals you're about to see. I say that because it's me. I'm the individual I don't want you to judge. Part 1. What even is positioning, really? Arena has a really simple rule set. It's a deathmatch. The environment is simple, so even the basic features of the environment become key strategic elements. A ledge, a pillar, any advantage you can get over your opponent furthers your chances of success. As such, how you utilize the space is significant. Positioning is not just where you choose to stand, it's how you move and how it informs the rest of your strategy. So let's start with the most fundamental explanation of positioning ever. This will double as an intro for melee because we're basic. Imagine two level 1 warriors. They have no abilities and they are dueling in a grand arena. We'll be cheering for blue warrior. Go team. What is the safest place for our warrior on this map? Well, literally anywhere red isn't. The most offensive, dangerous position would be within melee range of red. This is important to understand. There is no inherently safe area on the map. You will always be positioning relative to your opposition. Now, what if we introduce charge? With a gap closer, distance alone doesn't offer safety. So now where is the safest place? Well, it's behind a pillar, breaking line of sight to the warrior and denying them the ability to charge. But where is the most offensive? Well, I guess it's still just near red, but if the pillar has defensive value, an offensive position would look to deny the opposition that benefit as well. So the most defensive position would be here, right in the center of the map. If the other warrior tries to escape, blue can charge him down. This creates an element of risk-reward. Exposing yourself to danger can force your opponent into that same position. Now, let's introduce a healer for each of our warriors. Let's say they are paladins with Holy Light and Hammer of Justice. Each healer's vision becomes our most important consideration. If they each take a pillar, the middle of the map becomes comparatively safer than it was, and distance away from the healer becomes increasingly dangerous. In this scenario, the most dangerous position in the arena becomes the enemy healer's pillar. This offers the healers an element of safety. If the warriors want to hit the healers, the paladin can just stand behind the pillar and deny the enemy healer line of sight of their ally. But for the moment, this setup is a stalemate. How does blue go about winning? Well, the first idea that comes to mind is simple. Blue pal could just stun the red paladin. This could involve just walking through the dog pile, or they could take a longer route to avoid the enemy warrior. Maybe blue can pull red warrior back toward the blue pillar, potentially trick red into going around the pillar, getting stunned by blue pal and dying completely isolated from his healer. This is known as overextending and will be familiar to you if you've seen my earlier video. Or perhaps blue war can pull red war back, and when red pal pushes up to stay in range, blue war can charge the now exposed healer, while blue pal pushes up and lands a Hammer of Justice. All three of these options are viable and carry different pros and cons. The first scenario, stunning the enemy healer, is the most obvious, but it's also the most risky. Since the blue pal needs to stop healing while moving, exposes himself while swapping pillars, and risks being stunned himself. The second is the most absolute but relies on a significant mistake from Red War. If he doesn't fall for it, Blue has nothing. The final option is the most complex to execute and carries its own risk, with Blue Pal compromising his own safety, but it carries less risk than the first option. Note that by this stage we are talking about target selection and setups, but through the lens of positioning. And by this stage, this analogy is no longer useful, but this is an introduction to positioning that we'll spend the rest of this video expanding on. Now we can talk about how this dynamic changes with wizards. Part 2. I don't play a wizard, but I've queued into nothing but MLX for the past 6 months, so yeah, I feel qualified. Wizards, in pretty much any other meta, live and die based on their positioning. Some specs, like Arcane, have quite a lot of mobility, and classes like Warlock have limited mobility, so they of course play differently. Let's begin by subbing Blue War with Blue Lock. The same fundamentals apply, however the Warlock is a lot less mobile, which puts emphasis on their positioning. Movement can be difficult, so they need to get it right the first time. Exposed ground is more dangerous than standing by the pillars, only for wizards, pillars represent a total denial of the ability to play. When your target is dancing around a pillar, there's very little you can do. As such, wizards want to entice the enemy away from pillars wherever possible. The ability for a wizard to successfully cast is their highest priority. One advantage wizards have is the ability to set the positioning when playing against melee. If you are the target, they need to hit you, so where you stand is where they stand. Blue Warlock's decision to stand in the middle of the map presents Red Warrior with very few options. He either goes and stands out there to hit the blue lock, or he doesn't. There is a third option of targeting the healer, but that just gives Blue Lock all of the freedom at none of the risk. In our stupid scenario, our Warlock has no mobility tools at all, but in practice most wizards have big mobility tools on a cooldown. This is Warlock Gateway, Mage Shimmer, Priest Greater Fade. These tools can be used defensively to exit a dangerous scenario, or offensively to push in. This is most easily demonstrated by the Mage spell Shimmer, a variant of Blink that can be used while casting. Mages use Shimmer almost exclusively to secure casts. Positioning against a mage often requires you to compensate for the blink. You need to be aware of where the mage could end up. So this section is a little bit shorter than everything else, but wizards play a prominent role in all the later stuff, so don't worry, there's plenty of wizards in 8.3. It's a wizard meta, man. Cunt's fucked. Part 3. Healers. I promised myself I would artificially extend the length of these chapter headings to justify this fancy graphic, but I couldn't think of anything. In my mind, healers have the most complex relationship with positioning. Healers control the pace of the game through their own positioning. The default position for a healer is very defensive, at the furthest back pillar. Applying what we've learned earlier, we can identify why this is the case. With this positioning in a threes game, the healer is an awkward and dangerous target for the enemy. Pushing in on the healer takes time, and it telegraphs their intention to the healer. Pushing in to hit a healer also moves the enemy's own healer up and exposes them to crowd control from the wizard. This position presents enough risks that it can deter melee from just running at the healer. If you do, it can often look like this.
Okay. God damn it, man. I popped dark.
There are two ways to interpret this clip, and both are true. The melee were reckless to mindlessly chase the priest around the pillar, but also the monk failed to read the tempo of the game and enabled his team to stay aggressive. If I just roll some other clips of aggressive melee comps, you can see the healers are always in the thick of it. The aggression seen here allows the melee to do what they want, but it comes at great risk to the healer. The healer is exposed to more CC than they would otherwise, their team is taking more damage than they would otherwise, and the healer's ability to cast safely is reduced. So while there are benefits to the style of play, it requires more cooldowns from the healer, and that shortens the length of time they can keep their team alive. This idea of distance to the enemy being a gauge for aggression can be seen in the toolkits of healers as well. Their offensive abilities have shorter ranges than the rest of their kit, be it needing to be in melee range for a druid's mighty bash, or 30 yards away for a shaman's purge. In this way, we can see a direct correlation between a healer's distance from the dog pile and the length of their games. In practice, most healers will shift between these defensive and aggressive positions, and that is what I'm talking about when I say healers control the pace of the game. If you play a healer, you are already doing this, even if you don't do it knowingly. When you are in danger, you try and get away from the enemy, and they will chase you. When they are in danger, you chase them. However, if you stay at this foundational understanding, things can go wrong. Take this game on my shaman. We are miles ahead and on track to win comfortably, but we have so much momentum that I feel like I need to contribute to that. So I push in to kick the priest, miss and overextend into the dog pile. I get swapped to and die as a result. We had the momentum, but we didn't need an interrupt or a hex to win the game. There is a difference between a paladin pushing in to secure a game-winning hodge when momentum is in their favour, and leading a setup with a Hodge when you have no momentum. We will see an example of this a little later, but for now we're going to power through some other concepts. Part 4.1. Movement. Movement is the connective tissue between positions. Movement without purpose is a habit you want to break. When you're new to Arena and overstimulated, a classic play is just to run if you're being hit. This is particularly true of healers who are being trained by melee. This is a bad habit because running is not inherently defensive. If you are slowed and the enemy player is not, you are never going to get distance from them doing this, so the damage won't change. The defensive value of running is to make distance, to the point that you can't be hit anymore. Pointless running is in some respects worse than simply standing still. While running, you deny yourself the ability to cast. You are effectively CCing yourself. You aren't baiting kicks, so you're no more likely to land casts when you're done running. So this is it. You're running forever. It also means that your positioning is determined by chance. You just end up wherever you happen to be. If a melee is training you, particularly as a healer, your first priority is using your tools to create distance. Hard crowd control, slows, maybe just sprints in the right circumstances. If that is not an option, you are better off baiting kicks while gradually moving toward a better position, as determined by, the rest of this video. Zoning. Zoning refers to any action that influences where the enemy can stand. This can be explicit zoning, such as Ring of Peace, where the enemy cannot enter it. You can also have implicit zoning, such as Gladiator's Spite or Ring of Frost. You can enter the area, but at a cost. Here's a slightly more abstract example. Here Cedu is playing into an Iron Pal in the Grand Arena, and the priest actually uses himself and the threat of fear to force Cedu off the pillar. This allows the rogue to stun Cedu, and then guarantees the mage a free poly on Cedu. This is an example of zoning, as this is CC that would not have landed had it not been for the priest's decision to take the pillar. The pincer is another example of zoning. Double wizard comps can force enemy teams onto pillars, and then each wizard comes in at a different angle to ensure that at least one of them is free to cast. Note here that even though the warlock could conceivably push in further to cast, he doesn't. He holds the position, because his presence here is allowing his teammate to do full damage. This scenario, while not the most damage the Lock and Shaman could do, is incredibly stable. They could do this all day at no risk, whereas pushing in to land one extra Chaos Bolt could put WizK in danger. Maps. Going all the way back to the beginning of this video, because the rule set of Deathmatch is so straightforward, significance is applied to the environment. As such, the maps are significant. The size of maps vary wildly. Small maps tend to favour melee since they have more immediate access to line of sight, and have kind of a cage match thing going on, where wizards can't get good distance from the melee. Larger maps favour ranged classes, as they can better isolate melee from the pillars. Like, Mugunbala's central pillar is so large that a warlock can get multiple casts on you in the time it takes for you to run the length of it. The Z-axis. The Z-axis refers to height, ledges and bridges. It is a powerful tool in the right context, both defensively and offensively. If a wizard is up on a ledge with an enemy melee below, it's fish in a barrel. A healer or wizard having height over most melee is a huge advantage. The most visceral use for the Z-axis is knockbacks, knocking players down from a height. This has both defensive and offensive value. Knocking a player down is a surefire way to isolate them from their teammates, and for wizards can immediately create that fish in a barrel framing. That same Z-axis can also be used defensively though, as it's the most immediate way to loss an enemy. But it's a commitment, since you're stuck down there for a bit. As such, dropping down on Blade's Edge should be a team effort. Part 5. We're reviewing a few VoDs for the rest of the video. You're free to leave, but if most of this has been new to you, stick around and test yourself. Can you recognise what has gone wrong before being told? Do you see some other problem that I don't acknowledge? I'll number each of these examples, and if you have any of your own thoughts on any of these clips, go ahead and comment. Just don't cyberbully me, please. And this goes for everyone here. This is not about judging ability. This is about learning. It's about learning from the interesting scenarios that these players have found themselves in. We'll begin with a really easy one, just to establish the format. What happens here?
Why
See if,
man? What did
see if this guy chases me back here. Yeah, let's go.
Oh my. He lured him into the den.
What's up, bro? No spell reflect?
And we win.
Okay.
The comms give it away. The warlock pulls back into their start room and the enemy warrior follows them. He gets crowd controlled aggressively and the warlock pops his infernal. The disc priest was not prepared for this and is zoned away from the best line of sight by the paladin. The priest uses pain sup, but the paladin lands some CC on the priest because he'd left the pillar, and the warrior dies through commanding shout and pain sup. As with a lot of these position-based clips, we can scrutinize other aspects of the play. The defensive usage, the warrior trinkets nothing, and the priest doesn't trinket at all. But what's important to understand is that the root cause of this scenario is positioning. The warrior haplessly followed the warlock into a room during both their cooldowns and died as a result. If you want a masterclass in good positioning, Sidu and his mates are some of the best. They've appeared throughout this video because there is always such intent in their play, but that doesn't mean they don't lose games due to problems with positioning. What you're about to see is how positioning can go wrong even if almost every decision is correct.
He combo and claw, it's fine.
Start me. IBM.
Stop this. I got him stuck right now, son. Big kick here. Big kick.
I do that. I can shoot maybe.
I kept two. Space.
I got in front of that. I can still get maybe.
We need to kite right now. Okay?
Okay, let's kite.
Maybe not.
Maybe.
Let me
I'm in a really bad spot for me.
Really?
I press.
It's good.
Okay.
We kind of kited other ways. I wanted to go this way.
Shit. I gotta shoot
this way.
that way.
Reflected?
Yeah, that way was just like through all the CC for me.
Okay, shoot this way.
That's it whenever.
I'm full clone here. I have Cocoon if I get out. You're gonna launch over. He has addressed.
I like
He's gonna address you. Maybe parry.
Parry. Yep, did it.
Spawn your claw here.
Nothing though.
I'm being really greedy. I feel like Connie's not healing you.
I guess I'm here.
Good short. I'm gonna 8 reps here or some shit.
Actually, I trigger this.
I'm gonna reach for it.
Do you stop for this?
Maybe we'll shoot them. Maybe we'll shoot.
Kill it.
Trigger a sec.
I'm full repped here.
Yeah, I can
You
die
dead?
then.
Really?
Can't help you, you're dead. Can't really.
Anything?
Nothing.
So Sidu's team feel like they're winning the game prior to this moment. Most of what goes wrong here snowballs from bad positioning caused by the opposition. We start the clip with this setup. The warrior is on the warlock and the mage is right by his healer, perhaps closer than he'd like, but understandable given the circumstances. The enemy paladin pushes in for a repentance. The mage kicks the cast, so is unable to stop the feral druid's incoming cyclone. Sidu uses Rop to knock that cast, and then they overlap Dragon's Breath and Incap while stopping the next clone. Sidu is now without any stops, and with 2 potential sources of CC, his only defense is distance and a pillar. An Infernal Stun lands, and it's time to go. He calls for his team to kite, dreaming of this positioning. As he calls that, Sam blinks in and lands a full poly on the enemy healer. From this point, there is no way Sam can reach Sidu's preferred spot for him, and 2 Chaos Bolts and a big bite later, Sam needs to Ice Block. Sidu rolls to the main pillar to get a better position relative to Sam, who is pulling away from the warlock. The feral is able to land a full cyclone from this new position. Sam pulls around, presumably to DB the follow-up CC, and Mez is now totally isolated. Sidu needs to push off the pillar to reach Mez. Parry and Conduit are used to keep him alive. The enemy lock uses his gate offensively to cross the pillar, and there is now no one to stop the fear. It paths Sidu even further from the edge of the pillar, giving the paladin an easy hodge, and shortly after a full rep lands, and Sam dies. With the benefit of hindsight, of knowing how each decision would pan out, we could criticize parts of this, but the only real mistake comes from these 1.2 seconds.
Maybe.
We need to kite right now.
The call to kite comes after Sam has blinked in. It's too late by this point. But under normal circumstances, this would just be a wasted ice block and the game would continue as normal. It's smart play from the enemy team that snowballs this moment into a comprehensive win. Oh, this one hurts. This one's one of mine. Just watch it and we'll break it down.
Okay, I'm hodging healer. Full hodge.
Is Dark Sun now, do I calm this or?
I think we're okay.
It's gonna get bopped,
Okay.
so it's just... Yeah, there it is.
I got the bot,
I get next kick here, got on gateway. Big cleave on everyone here.
You hit.
Red's looking pretty good as well. I kind of want to run on the shell though.
Yeah, right.
You see Ryan? I what up,
No.
what up.
Okay, I see you now.
Oh, fuck.
Sorry, I'm playing terribly right now, my bad. That was... I hope you can appreciate just how many times I've had to watch that clip by the time you're seeing this. Like with that C2 example earlier, this is another example where the dominant team loses against the grain due to positioning. My positioning. After spending so much time on this pillar, I've come to equate it with safety, but my paladin was just ropped off it, and with Lock at half health, it goes to stun the enemy monk. He's now at the base of the ramp. Notice that we only know this from a few frames of footage, because I'm not actually looking at where my healer is. This is the core problem. During the next 20 seconds, my healer shifts from the base of the ramp up to the bridge proper. It ends up here. This isn't necessarily conventional positioning, but it's not bad either. The Z-axis obviously has the ability to lost casts, and he's not an easy target for any of the paladin and monk CC. After the lock gates away, my health is getting low and the paladin has half his wings left. I drop down to get line of the warlock and return to where I imagine my healer would be, missing the split second he's on screen. The next few seconds is a goddamn tour of the entire map as I check off potential places for my healer to be, never actually thinking to ask where I ought to go. I see the Warlock casting before I see the star marker, so I immediately commit to dropping back down, assuming the Paladin went up the opposite side of the ramp, the quickest path back to me. Turns out he actually crossed under the bridge, and I just drop onto his lap at 20% health. I die and have a lot of explaining to do. This is the kind of thing that happens when you play with blinders on. At every step of the process, I defer to some combination of intuition or best guess, rather than taking the fraction of a second to take in the environment.
Close up here.
Yeah, DB this mage.
I can hold. You ready? Kidney.
Yeah,
Never mind.
Kidney?
I'm gonna get fucked up.
Okay, I can't, dude.
Okay, stop sheep, please. Stop sheep.
If you can ship Druid, we can spite. Don't hodge, try to ship Druid if you can.
Bring this guy. This is fucking busting on me. I'm dead, dude.
Come to me.
Run to us.
Stunned.
I'm coming over there. Battle
Mhm.
Master.
You're fine, I promise you. You're fine.
Just
Sheep
fine,
now,
it's fine, it's
fuck.
fine, it's fine.
You're fucking sheep again. I like
Block.
Okay. Blocking. We're playing like shit right now.
Because we're waiting on Spike goes. We're not like stopping their damage. All we're doing is waiting for Spike. Like, look.
Yeah,
He's controlling
timing
us.
a G-Pie.
He's controlling us. Look, G-Pie. Just control the mage, please.
We spoke earlier about the difference between a Paladin taking risks to secure a game-winning Hodge, and a Paladin taking those same risks to just try and start something. This is an example of the latter. This Paladin is on tilt. The game is stable, but the RM Pal is slowly losing. Nothing interesting is happening, and that favours the MLD. The enemy mage is fearless, playing on top of both the mage and the healer. Something needs to change. So the Holy Paladin calls for a simple Kidney Hodge cross CC.
I can hodge. You ready? Kidney.
He uses his steed but does not have a freedom, so is instantly rooted by the lock and the kidney connects. The Resto Druid responds with Ironbark. At this point, the setup is over. Our Paladin recognises this and begins to pull back, but decides to push back in for the Hodge. He is aware of the danger and calls for a stop to the polymorph. He makes it across the midfield before being rooted again into a fear, which paths him to the far wall of Tolvaron Arena. In this time, the Druid got a re-stealth in and is able to rake stun off the fear, and being so isolated, he gets absolutely bodied by CC for the rest of the game. The mage is forced to push in toward the enemy to what is now his healer's position. None of the players were happy with how this game went, and would probably agree that it's a mulligan. But what we saw was a Holy Paladin compromise his position and expose himself to all the CC in the game in order to not land a 6-second stun. So here's just a fun one to see us out.
He actually ported by chilling. Oh shit!
This is just a bunch of crossed wires. There is a CC chain on Space Rat, so the monk uses Diffuse Magic and ports to the other side of the far pillar. The monk charges back in and reconnects before his healer could heal him at all, really. As this is happening, the enemy Holy Paladin pushes in on Space Rat to land a rep that the rat manages to avoid. He's looking to cross the pillar to reach his monk from the other side. The monk has the opposite idea and begins to swing around the other way to where Space Rat was. Space Rat realizes this and begins to course correct himself, before the monk also corrects and rolls back towards Space Rat's new position. The end result is this elegant mating ritual, complete with human sacrifice, while Space Rat had all but one cooldown available. The solution to this is the simplest one. The monk just needed to wait until he was healed before going back in. He could have healed himself more back behind the pillar, he could have dropped a new port closer to the pillar and had not been as isolated from his healer, or he could have flying kicked to Space Rat and chilled until he was topped. Mate, this new place is bloody brilliant. Brand new build, fiber to the premises, expecting at least 100 MIPS, probably 200. I have so many plans. So all I've got to do is plug this modem in and, well, that can't be right. That's just a piece of string. Fuck! Koalas will be extinct in New South Wales by the year 2050. So yeah, Warcraft content for the foreseeable future is kind of up in the air. There are worse times to take a break from Warcraft, particularly Arena. 8.3 has been a very hard patch to love. We'll just put it that way. With Warcraft stuff being harder to make, I'm going to branch out and make some more varied stuff that interests me and fits what I can sort of fit within this this workflow right now. So hopefully people enjoy it. You know, let me know what you think at the time. Wasn't this video about something else? What the fuck were we talking about? World of Warcraft arena positioning. So as demonstrated by that slog of a video you just sat through, positioning isn't sexy. It isn't showy. It's the kind of thing that you will not often get praised for, unlike, you know, the big setups, the big Swifty one-shots. Positioning is something that will underline everything you do. People won't necessarily be able to describe why it is you're doing well in a lot of cases. You just happen to be where they need you to be at certain points. And that just comes from a lot of practice and a lot of awareness. What I want you to take from this video more than anything is just to be conscious about where you're standing. Even if none of what I've actually spoken about has penetrated, as long as when you're in the game you are thinking about where you're standing, you will do better. Because even if you've never played a single game of Arena, you will do better trying to position yourself correctly than if you left it to chance. So if you enjoyed these and want to see something absolutely nothing like it in the near future, go ahead and subscribe. Otherwise, hope you found the video useful. Best of luck, and